Well, good afternoon, everyone. Did I hear people say good afternoon? Let me begin with some preliminary remarks, and then we'll take your questions. First, I want to renew my pledge of a few weeks ago to work cooperatively and professionally with Governor Rauner. I will remain focused on the elimination of the budget deficits, especially the deficit in the current budget, plus the next two. As I work to eliminate the budget deficits, I'm going to continue to work to protect and help working men and women of middle-class families, those men and women who want to work but cannot find a job, those who are single with children that find it difficult to balance a job with raising children. I have two differences of opinion with the governor. Number one concerns the elimination of the deficits. The governor has said that he feels that he can eliminate the deficits just by cutting state services. I disagree. I think that the elimination of the deficits will require a blend. Service cuts plus new revenue. And in the case of the new revenue, that's the reason why I'm supporting the imposition of a 3% surcharge on millionaires on their income over $1 million. The money derived from this 3% surcharge would be spent on education. It would provide about $1 billion of new money for education, and that would be about $550 per pupil. The second point of difference with the governor relates to pensions and the spending of anticipated savings, where I think the governor proposes to engage in conduct which I would consider to be reckless. But let me begin with Senate Bill 1, which is currently in litigation before the Illinois Supreme Court. When we drafted Senate Bill 1, we did not cut benefits. We cut the increases in the benefits going forward, except for low-income wage earners who were exempted from the provisions of the bill. The bill provided that there would be more state money put into the state pension systems. It provided that where the state failed to make its payment, the systems would be empowered by the statute to file a lawsuit in the court system to get a court order to compel the state to make its payment. And significantly, during the current budget, we did not spend the anticipated savings from Senate Bill 1. We made a conscientious decision last spring not to spend the anticipated savings. In the case of the Rauner proposal, as I understand it, it would appear to be a reduction in benefits, which we did not do in Senate Bill 1, and they are proposing to spend $2.2 billion of anticipated savings, which I consider to be reckless conduct and something that should not be done. Questions?
Mr. Speaker, when I presume you've shared these concerns with the governor, when you say, I think this conduct's reckless, and I also think we need more revenue, like a tax on millionaires, what kind of response did you get?
Well, I'll let the governor respond on those matters. Obviously, the governor has said that he feels that he can eliminate the deficits in the state budget simply by cutting services. I disagree. I think you need a blend of cuts in services and new revenue, like the surcharge on millionaires. So there's an easy point of difference. Concerning the spending of anticipated savings, I think that's a good question that you ought to put to the administration, because it's part of their documents. It's part of their plan. $2.2 billion is a significant amount of money, especially when we're attempting to eliminate deficits. As you know, last year we were a few votes short, and the answer to that question lies among Republicans from central and southern Illinois who represent areas that would profit greatly from the imposition of the surcharge. So there are certain Republican representatives that represent counties where there's only one millionaire. And so if this were to happen, why their school districts would benefit greatly, and they ought to support the submittal of the resolution to the voters at the next general election.
The governor said today that you were very close, within days of an agreement on figuring out a way
Sure.
to solve current fiscal year's budget deficit. Are you in fact that close?
I think it's a matter of days away. There's been some very good, fruitful discussions over 1 or 2 weeks. Obviously, it's a difficult matter because you're talking partly in terms of reducing the level of appropriation, reducing the level of services. We've recommended that the governor draw upon what we refer to as other state funds, which is about $600 million, which is about half the problem. I think that they will agree to do that. The question remaining would be, well, how do you do it? Do you just let the governor do it, or do you put it into a bill? Obviously, the Democrats will have a greater comfort level if everything is set out in the bill and they know what they're voting on.
Governor, or Speaker, you say, was that a 3% tax? Is that a 3% tax on millionaires, or the 3% surcharge? What was it?
This was offered a year ago. It's a constitutional amendment. It would say that for people who report over $1 million in income on their Illinois tax returns, there would be a 3% surcharge on the income over $1 million. That 3% would be distributed to the elementary and secondary school districts in the state on a per pupil basis. It would come to about $550 a pupil. Across the state, it would be about $1 billion, which would be a healthy infusion of money into the school districts that really do need additional money in order to maintain their operations.
So would it take a constitutional amendment this time, and wouldn't that then take like a couple of years to get the money?
That's all true, and that's the reason why if we had 3 to 4 to 5 Republican votes last spring, why the advisory referendum passed with votes sufficient that the constitutional amendment would have passed, and that would be in place today.
What about other new revenue, like broadening the sales tax to include services, or reinstituting the temporary income tax increase as opposed to millionaires?
Those are all items that will come into negotiation and discussion as we do the budget making. We plan to engage in a normal budget making, which means that appropriation bills will be filed, they'll be assigned a committee, they'll be considered in the committee, they'll be considered on the floor. We're very pleased that apparently the Republicans will join us this year in the budget making because they've been absent for several years. We're very pleased about that. We're happy to see their smiling faces.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think are some of the level of proposed cuts that the governor
To me, that's where I would say that as I work with the governor, cooperatively and professionally, to eliminate these budget deficits, I'm going to work to protect working people. That's what I'm going to do. There's a false notion by a lot of people that these government programs and services provided by the government only help poor people. That's not true. They go well into the middle class, and many middle-class families are very dependent upon certain government programs. Many of them are threatened by this proposed budget where the governor would say, we can solve the budget deficit problem simply with cuts in services. I disagree. I think there should be a blend. Yes, we should cut some services, but we should work to find new revenue, and that's where there'll be a variety of items on the table for discussion and negotiation.
Speaker?
Did you hear anything about a capital bill? Is that something that's going to come later?
I would support a capital program. I think it's good for the economy of the state, good for the state itself. I've supported many capital bills over the years. It's a good thing to do.
Speaker, what about a new round of pension funds?
That's not a good idea. Yeah, not a good idea. Despite what Governor Walker wants to do in Wisconsin and Governor Christie in New Jersey.
Speaker, Ralph Martiri just gave an address to the management of education, and he was saying that the critical thing that we could really do was to re-amortize the pension debt, that we don't have to be locked into that. We could spread that out over the next 40 years, and that would free up something like, I don't know, a lot of money. I don't know what the number would be. Would you be in favor of at least considering such an approach?
Well, that's what's called a refinancing. and that's what Governor Walker is proposing in Wisconsin. That's churning the paper by the underwriters and the investment houses, and the 1% of the country just make more money. That's what that does.
Speaker, the governor has this $20 million fund that he ostensibly is ready and willing to use to get legislators to stay on his side. How do you combat that?
By just telling it the way it is, as I'm doing today. And so the governor has done what he's done. We'll be called upon to communicate to the best of our ability in terms of our plans for budget making, our plans for other legislation before the General Assembly. My experience in matters like this would indicate that $20 million is a lot of money, but you don't need $20 million to adequately communicate your message to people so that they know it and they understand it.
In general terms, this speech has been characterized by people like Lou Lang as a heartless proposal, to Ty Fainer as politically courageous. Where on the spectrum do you fall?
I think it's where Governor Rauner wants to be. I mean, he made a conscious decision to draft this speech and to prepare it and to deliver the speech, and the elements in the speech would reflect where he wishes to be in terms of solving the government problems. I have differences with that. Not entirely. There's a lot of things the governor wants to do that I would agree to do, like eliminating budget deficits, like putting the state's fiscal house in order. You may remember that I argued that when Blagojevich was the governor, but I didn't get too far.
Speaker, is a budget,
Neither did he.
Speaker, is a budget that balances the deficit on cuts alone a non-starter for you?
Nothing in the legislature is a non-starter. Nothing in the legislature is a non-starter. In the legislature, everything's open for discussion. Everything's open for negotiation. I'm stating my personal view on how best to eliminate the budget deficits and not cause undue pain and harm and suffering to people that really need help from the government just to get through the day.
The governor talked about $6 billion in transfers to local governments and indicated that he thought there was a lot of savings to be found there. Do you agree with him? And how much do you, if so, how much of the savings do you think are?
You have to understand that if you reduce the amount of money being transferred to the local governments, you're putting pressure on the local government budgets. Those are budgets that normally support police departments, fire departments, garbage pickup, water service, sewer service, and so there'll be some difficulty put upon those local governments. That's something that has to be understood before you get into a discussion about that particular area of the budget.
What about the property tax freeze then?
It's the same area. You know, you're making it more difficult for the local governments to do what they do. You all know what they do. They provide essential services.
He also talked about the corrupt bargain again, and continues to talk about
Yeah.
things that has done so for a few weeks now.
Sure.
Does that help get stuff through the legislature, or is that a hindrance to it?
Well, speaking for myself, you know, in his inaugural remarks, the governor talked about eliminating cozy insider deals. And I met with him the next day, and I thanked him for the challenge. And I explained to him that the biggest cozy insider deal in the last century in Illinois was the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum. And I called upon him to join me in my efforts to reform the governance structure at the library and the museum. And I'm very pleased that he and I are moving together on this project. And you know from his speech that he apparently agrees that the library and the museum should be a freestanding entity in a position to manage its affairs without undue interference from other people.
Speaker, you say you're a few days away from a deal on the current fiscal year. Theoretically, that takes quite a bit of reallocation. What are some of those departments that are going to be taking a hit?
Well, we would rely upon the governor in that section of the agreement. So I would expect that this will be a multifaceted agreement. And when it comes to spending by the agencies in the executive department, why, we would ask the governor, what are your ideas here? Where do you want to go? When you get to the question of the fund sweeps, taking money from what we call the other state funds, the legislature would play a greater role in selecting the funds to be used than they would in the case of executive department spending.
Mr. Speaker, you said that it's not just the lowest third of people who benefit from programs, it's more than that. A lot of people benefit from government programs. So in that light, is there something Governor Rauner doesn't understand?
Oh, I think the governor has a good understanding of what he's doing. As I said earlier, he's chosen to occupy the space that he's occupying. That's his decision. He's entitled to make that decision. And the people in the legislature are entitled to agree with him, as some do, or disagree, as many do. Out of all of that will come a work product at the end of May. And hopefully it will be a good, sound plan that will put the government, the state government, on a path toward restoring fiscal stability, at the same time not unduly hurting people that depend upon the government for services.
Yeah, something the governor would sign, not veto.
Excuse me?
Something the governor would sign.
Well, we hope so. We hope so, yeah.
Speaker, the governor has said that he wants to change pension benefits going forward, so people can keep what they've earned thus far.
Yeah.
How is that non-constitutional, that Senate Bill 1 is?
Because of the language in the Constitution, which uses language which talks in terms of not diminishing pension benefits. One legal theory in this area is that the day you start a job, you're vested and you're entitled. And any change is a diminishment. That's the reason why we drafted Senate Bill 1 the way we drafted the bill. Let me repeat. We did not cut benefits. We deliberately did not cut benefits. We cut the increases in the benefits, and we exempted low-income wage earners, so there'd be no undue harm for those people. This is a matter that is subject to differences of opinion among lawyers, and it's subject to adversarial litigation before the Supreme Court. So we'll all just wait to see what the 7 justices do.
I think there's another group that has dibs on the room. I don't want to cut
Okay.
this low fast.
Yeah, right.
So, one more.
The governor didn't totally close the door, he indicated he might be open to, should there be some business reform, workers' compensation reform. Are those ideas that could be public discussion, or are those two separate issues in your mind?
Yeah, well, you see here again, the governor has made his decision. And it would appear from listening to his speech that he wants to do a linkage between spending and matters such as unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, changes in the tort law. That's his position. There will be some people in the legislature who will agree with that. There will be many who will disagree. And out of all of that, why, we'll get a resolution on whether we ought to change the unemployment insurance system, workers' compensation, the tort law, what the budget will do, what it will provide. As you know, you've been here, you know that this is a good demonstration in American democracy. It's not a one-part government, it's a 3-part government. And all 3 departments do their part, and out of that comes a result. You may like it, you may not like it.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.